Picture a city that you can smell before you can see it. Not faintly, not the way you might catch a bakery from half a block away or a restaurant from across the street. I mean a smell that hits you 20 miles out, before the skyline is even a smudge on the horizon, before you've crossed the last stretch of flat Illinois farmland, before the train conductor has even announced the station. A smell that gets into your coat, into your hair, into the soft tissue of your lungs, where it will stay for the rest of your life. That's Chicago in 1883. Now fill that smell with layers. Blood first. Not the faint copper smell of a cut finger. The industrial, thick animal smell of 10,000 gallons of blood draining through gutters every single day. Blood that has soaked so deeply into the soil of the South Side that when it rains, the mud runs pink. Add to that the smell of rendering, fat being boiled down into lard in vats the size of rooms, the hot, greasy, sickening sweetness of it. Add offal, the parts of animals that don't become food, the stomach contents, the intestines, the lungs, the hide scraped clean. Add it to the river, because the river is where everything goes. The Chicago River runs south through the city and out into Lake Michigan, which is also where Chicago gets its drinking water, which tells you everything you need to know about the relationship between ambition and common sense in this city. Add coal smoke. Every furnace, every factory, every locomotive, every tenement stove burning cheap anthracite, all day, all night, every day of the year. The sky above Chicago's South Side has a permanent brown tinge. Sunsets here are genuinely spectacular because all that particulate matter scatters the light into pinks and oranges that a painter would kill for. Small comfort. Add 400,000 people packed into neighborhoods where the streets are unpaved rivers of mud in spring, choking dust in summer, frozen ruts in winter. 400,000 people who are mostly not from here. Polish, Czech, German, Lithuanian, Italian, Irish. People who stepped off trains from New York or steamships from Hamburg with no English and no money and no plan beyond a name on a piece of paper and the vague, desperate hope that the stockyards are hiring. They are always hiring. That's the thing about Chicago. It will always take you. It does not care where you're from, or what language you speak, or what God you pray to. It only cares whether your hands still work and whether you can keep up with the line. The line never stops. That's Misto, the second city, the city of big shoulders, the city that burned to the ground in 1871 and came back angrier and bigger and louder and more itself than before. A city that can produce Marshall Field's dry goods palace and open sewers on the same block. A place where you can watch the sun rise over Lake Michigan in colours you've never seen in your life, and then walk 3 streets west and watch a man drink himself to death in a saloon that doesn't lock its doors. We're going back there tonight. Not on a tour, not reading a plaque outside a museum. We're living it. 1 year, 1 body, everything it would have cost you. I make these history sleep stories and I genuinely have no idea if you're listening to fall asleep or because you have some kind of morbid fascination with 19th century industrial conditions. Honestly, both are valid. Either way, get comfortable. You're going to be tired by the end of this one, and I don't mean that metaphorically. Here we go. Here's what nobody tells you about hard labour. It doesn't just make you tired, it rewrites you. Not slowly, the way aging rewrites you, the way decades of small decisions accumulate into a face and a posture, and a particular way of moving through the world. This is faster. This is radical. This is your body being edited by something external and enormous. Give it 3 months working the killing floor at the Union, stockyards in 1883, and the person who went in is not the person who comes out. Your hands are the first thing. They change within weeks. The blisters that come first, you've had blisters before, everyone has. But these blisters don't heal properly because the work doesn't stop. They tear and reform and tear again. The skin underneath grows thick and yellowish and hard. Calluses on your palms, on your fingers, across the heel of your hand. Your grip becomes different. Stronger, yes, but also locked. In the mornings you have to consciously uncurl your fingers, working them open like a machine that needs warming up before it can move freely. By month 2, the calluses are so thick you can run a knife across your palm without bleeding. This will seem like an achievement. It is not. Your back changes. The particular muscles required for standing at a fixed position and repeating the same motion thousands of times a day grow dense and knotted. You don't get evenly strong. You get specifically strong in some places and dangerously weak in others. The muscles along your right side, the ones doing the cutting, the pulling, the lifting, they hypertrophy, grow thick and capable. The muscles along your left side, the stabilizing muscles, the ones you're not consciously using, they atrophy. You start to walk with a slight lean that you don't notice until a priest comments on it. Your weight drops first, then stabilizes, then slowly climbs back as muscle. But the weight that comes back is not the same weight that left. You left Galicia with a boy's body, soft in the middle, unformed, not yet decided. What you get back is something else, dense, ropey, a body that has been used hard. Your lungs are a different story. The air in the yards is not air. It is a suspension of particles, blood mist, bone dust, the aerosolized contents of intestines, the smoke from the rendering works, the fine brown haze of dried manure from the pens. You breathe this all day. Your body tries to fight it. Your lungs develop a chronic low-grade inflammation that you will interpret as normal because you have no baseline of comparison anymore. Your cough in the mornings, the thick productive thing you hawk into the street before work, that is not normal. You don't know that. Your feet flatten. This is almost funny if you're in the right mood, which you never are. The arch of the human foot is designed to handle a certain amount of standing and walking on varied terrain. It is not designed for 12 hours of standing on wooden slats over a concrete floor. The arches flatten, the feet spread. The boots you arrived in no longer fit by November. You cannot afford new boots. You stuff the gaps with newspaper. None of this is complaint. I want to be clear about that. This is observation. Your body is a ledger, and it is recording everything that Chicago asks of it, and this is the account. Here is what the account looks like after 12 months. But let's not start there. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the smell, because that's always where Chicago starts. With the smell before you've even opened your eyes. Your eyes open to darkness, complete darkness. The kind you don't get in the countryside, where there's always some ambient sky glow, always stars or moon leaking through the curtains. This is urban darkness, tenement darkness. The window is small and faces the alley, and the alley is 6 feet wide and flanked by identical brick walls on both sides. So even at noon on a clear day you get about 40 minutes of direct light, and that's it. You're on the 3rd floor of a building on Halstead Street, south side, approximately 4 blocks west of the stockyards. You know it's approximately 4 blocks because you know the walk in your sleep. 12 minutes when it's clear. 15 in mud season. You know it in your sleep because some mornings you've walked it in your sleep, or near enough. The body moving on autopilot while the mind stays under, not quite surfaced, still dragging behind like a boat that hasn't fully cut loose from the dock. Before you've registered any of that, the smell arrives. This is not one smell. I need you to understand that. By now, 2 months in, 3 months in, however long you've been here, you have lost the ability to smell the yard specifically. You've adapted to it the way you'd adapt to the sound of a train yard near your house. It just becomes the baseline. What you smell when you wake up is the building. Every tenement on the south side has its own smell, and this one is damp wood. Cabbage that has been boiling somewhere since before you went to bed and is apparently still boiling. The particular smell of too many people sharing too little space. The accumulated breath and sweat and clothes and cooking of 5 families on this floor alone. Underneath that, mould. The walls of this building have been wet since the last heavy rain 3 weeks ago, and they have not dried. They will not dry until summer. The plaster on your wall has a dark stain shaped roughly like Lake Michigan, and it is warm to the touch in a way that suggests something is living in it. And underneath that, the yards. It saturates everything. Your coat hanging on the nail by the door carries it. The blanket on the bed, your own hair, your own skin, your own lungs expelling it with every breath. The smell of the yards is not something that happens outside. It is something you carry. You're lying on a straw mattress on a wooden frame. The mattress has seen other people before you. You prefer not to think about that. The blanket is wool, heavy and scratchy, and it smells exactly as described, but it is warm, and warm is the thing that matters most at 5:15 in the morning in November in Chicago. Next to you in the same bed is your cousin Tomasz. This is also normal. You share a bed because there are 3 other men sleeping in this same room on a different mattress. In the corner, Josef, who works at the soap works 2 blocks east, Piotr, who is at the yards like you, and a man whose name you've never quite caught, who appeared one night, paid 3 months' rent in advance to the landlord, and has barely spoken since. In the main room of the apartment, which is also the kitchen and the dining room and the sitting room, because all of those things are the same room, 3 more people sleep. Mrs. Kowalska and her 2 daughters, who are paying rent to your uncle, who technically lives here, but who you have only seen twice since you arrived, because he works nights at the gas works and sleeps days, and you work days and sleep nights, and Chicago is large enough that 2 people can occupy the same apartment and essentially never share the same waking hours. 11 people in 4 rooms. This is a good situation by the standards of Halstead Street. Some buildings in the back of the yards have 12 people in 2 rooms. There are reports of families sleeping in shifts. The night shift workers in the beds during the day shift workers in the same beds at night. The mattress is never fully cooling. You try not to think about that. The church bell from St. Adalbert's rings 5 times, and the building shifts around you. It's already awake. It never fully sleeps, this building, but it goes through phases of activity and quietude, and 5 o'clock marks the end of quiet. Doors opening, feet on the stairs, the groan of the wooden steps that have been groaning for so long they've become a kind of music, low, then higher, then low again, depending on where you are in your weight distribution. Tomasz is already up. He does this every morning, rises like a mechanism, no alarm needed. Just a body that has learned its schedule so completely that it has stopped needing external reminders. He is at the basin before your eyes are fully open, splashing water on his face with the quick efficiency of someone who has learned that the water in the basin will be gone soon, and that cold water is the only kind available anyway, so dwelling on the experience serves no purpose. You sit up. Your back registers this. Your back always registers this. The pain is not dramatic. It is not the sharp, specific pain of an injury. It is the deep, bone-level ache of a body that was not fully rested even in sleep, that has accumulated a week's worth of Monday through Saturday and is now confronting another Monday. It spreads from somewhere around the base of your spine up through your shoulder blades, a slow throb that will ease slightly once you're moving and return fully around too in the afternoon, and will be back in full force by the time you get home. This is not unusual. You don't even think of it as pain anymore. It's just mourning. The water situation requires explanation. In 1883, most Chicago tenements do not have running water inside the building. Some newer buildings do. Yours does not. There is a hand pump in the courtyard. Cold water always, regardless of season. In winter, it sometimes freezes, and then someone has to go down with hot water to thaw the mechanism, and that someone is usually the person who gets up earliest, which some mornings is you and some mornings is not. This morning, the pump is working. You can hear it. That specific squeak and thump from the third floor. Someone got there first. You take the basin down. It holds about 2 gallons, which is enough for the morning wash and for filling the pot for coffee. You use the word coffee loosely. What you drink in the morning is chicory, mostly, with a small amount of actual coffee grounds, boiled until it's the colour of dark mud and approximately as thick. It tastes like burned caramel and determination. You've become dependent on it. The courtyard is shared by 48 people. The pump handles 48 people's morning water needs, and also the cooking water, and also the washing, and the water for the 3 families on the first floor who keep small vegetable plots against the south-facing wall that are more optimism than agriculture, but represent something real and important about the human need to grow things even when there is nowhere to grow them. You wait your turn. The woman ahead of you, Mrs. Wasilewski from the second floor, who has 4 children and a husband who came home from the yards last spring missing 2 fingers on his right hand, and who's been drinking since in a way that is quiet and consistent and terrible. Mrs. Wasilewski fills her basin and her cooking pot and does not look up. She is tired. You are all tired. The pump is cold under your hand. You fill the basin and take it back upstairs. Breakfast. This is the word for it, and it is technically accurate in that it happens in the morning before work and involves food. What it actually involves is bread. Not fresh bread. That is for people who have either more time or more money or access to a bakery, and you have none of these things before 6 in the morning on a work day. Day-old bread from the Polish bakery on 47th Street, bought in quantity on Sunday and then worked through during the week. By Wednesday it is stiff. By Friday it is legitimate stone, and you soak it in the chicory coffee to make it chewable, which turns the coffee into something more like porridge, which is its own thing. Sometimes there is a sausage end, a grey dense piece of pork that is mostly fat and connective tissue, and sometimes something else that you have decided not to investigate. You eat it anyway. You eat everything anyway. This is not gluttony, and it is not even really appetite. It is the body demanding fuel because the body knows what the day is going to cost it. Pyotr eats standing up, his coat already on, chewing methodically. Tomasz is pulling on his boots, the leather cracking slightly at the toe. The unnamed man in the corner is already gone, has been gone since before the bells. His absence, so consistent and complete that his presence barely registers as a fact of your life anymore. You eat your bread, you drink your thick brown chicory water, you pull on 3 layers of shirt, because November in Chicago is not cold in the way that Galicia is cold, which is a clean cold, a cold that smells like snow and pine and frozen earth. Chicago cold is a wet cold that comes in off the lake and finds the gaps in your clothing and the spaces between the layers and settles there against your skin, insisting. You tie your boots. The knot on the left one has been broken and retied so many times it has a particular lumpy topology that you recognize by touch in the dark. You put on your coat. The coat is not your coat. It was your uncle's coat before it was yours, and before that, by the looks of the patches on the shoulders, it belonged to someone else entirely. It is heavy and dark and smells like years, and it is, without question, the most important piece of equipment you own. Without this coat, the walk to work in November would be a different proposition entirely. You step out of the apartment into the hallway. The hallway is dark, always. There is one gas jet at the top of the stairs that is lit in the evenings, but is off now, and the narrow corridor with its peeling wallpaper and its cracked plaster and its floor that bows slightly in the middle. You navigate it by memory. 12 steps to the stairwell. Mind the 3rd step from the top, which has a loose board that sounds like a gunshot if you hit it wrong and will wake everyone below. You hit it anyway. You always hit it anyway. Tomasz behind you hisses something in Polish. You know. You know. The door of the building opens and the city hits you. Not the smell. You've been breathing the smell all night. The sound. Chicago is louder than anything you've experienced, and Halsted Street at 5:30 in the morning is louder than you would have thought possible before you came here, which is to say it is already at this pre-dawn hour producing more noise than the largest market day in your home village. The stockyards run day and night. The shifts overlap. The day shift starts at 6. The night shift ends at 6. And the half-mile walk that separates the residential streets from the yards is, at this hour, a river of men moving in the same direction. Poles, Czechs, Lithuanians, a scattering of Germans. Men who have been doing this long enough that they walk in their sleep like you, heads down, shoulders slightly forward, the particular gait of a man who knows exactly where he's going and has no particular pleasure in the getting there. The street is not paved here. This is important. The streets immediately around the yards are unpaved, and in November, in a city that receives substantial rainfall, this means mud. Not artistic mud, not the picturesque mud of a country road. This is mud that has been worked over by thousands of pairs of boots and hundreds of cartwheels, and the hooves of cattle being driven to the pens, mud that contains hay and manure, and the runoff from the rendering works and whatever else has been deposited here over the years. A mud so aggressively muddy that it has its own specific smell, distinct from all the other smells, a brown mineral animal smell that clings to your boots and wicks up through the leather. You learn to walk on the edges, close to the buildings, where the ground is slightly firmer. You learn to step around the worse patches. You learn the topography of these streets the way you'd learn the topography of a garden, knowing which path to take, which places to avoid. By the first week, this knowledge is automatic. By the second, you don't think about it at all. The men around you are largely silent. There is some talking, subdued and in fragments, mostly in languages you don't share. an argument between two Czech men about something that sounds like money but might be anything. A man singing to himself, quietly, a folk song from somewhere far away, keeping himself company in the dark. A woman is selling coffee from a cart near the intersection of Halstead and 47th. Real coffee this time, or at least something closer to it. She's been here every morning since you arrived, and she will be here every morning for 30 more years, and her name is Mrs. Brzozowska, and she charges a penny for a cup, and the cup is small, and the coffee is good, and you cannot afford it every day. But today you have 3 cents in your coat pocket, left over from yesterday, and it is cold, and it is Monday, and you decide. The cup warms your hands before you've even raised it to your mouth. It is the best thing that will happen to you today. You drink it standing there on the corner, the steam rising in the cold air, watching the river of men flow past, all of them headed to the same place, all of them carrying the same slightly stooped posture of the pre-dawn commute. And for a moment, just for a moment before the coffee's gone and the morning reasserts itself, you feel something that is close to all right. Then the cup is empty. You hand it back to Mrs. Brzozowska. She nods, already filling it for someone else. You join the river. The pens begin a full block before the yards proper. You hear them first, the sound of thousands of animals, the muffled collective noise of cattle and hogs in the pens, not the individual moo or squeal you'd hear on a farm, but the compressed, averaged sound of thousands of those noises happening simultaneously, turned by sheer quantity into a kind of ambient roar. Then the smell hits you with its full force, not the attenuated version you've been carrying all night. The source. This is the smell that Chicago is known for. This is the smell that travellers describe in newspaper columns, with a mixture of horror and fascination. The smell that the Union Stockyards Association has been writing polite letters about since the 1870s. The smell that layers itself over everything within a 2-mile radius, and that the residents of the back of the yards have long since ceased to notice, but which still has the power, on a cold, windless morning, to stop a new arrival in their tracks. You are not a new arrival anymore, but you still feel it land some mornings, a reminder of where you are. You keep walking. I need you to understand the scale of this before we go any further. In 1883, the Union Stockyards on Chicago's South Side are the largest meatpacking complex in the world. Not figuratively, literally the largest. The single greatest concentration of the meat industry that has ever existed on this planet up to this point in human history. The yards cover 1 square mile. 1 full square mile of pens, chutes, killing floors, processing plants, rendering works, fertilizer factories, and the infrastructure required to move live animals in and dead meat out. On a busy day, and most days are busy days because America is growing and America is hungry, and the railroads have made it possible to ship beef and pork to every corner of the continent in refrigerated cars. On a busy day, the yards process 80,000 animals. 80,000. Cattle, hogs, sheep, brought in by rail from Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Texas. The cowboys who drove them here, if you can call them that in this context, men who load cattle onto railroad cars rather than driving them on horseback across open country, they come in from the west. The animals come in from the west. The trains arrive at the yard's own internal rail network, which connects directly to every major railroad line that runs through Chicago. And the animals step out of the cars and into the pens and into the chutes and into the process. The process is something that men who observe it for the first time almost universally describe in the same terms. They call it a machine. Not a factory, not a place, but a machine. Because that's what it is, a machine for converting living things into commerce at maximum speed and minimum wasted motion. Upton Sinclair will write about this place in 1906 in a book called The Jungle, and his descriptions will horrify the country, and the country will demand food safety regulations, which they will get. That's 23 years from now. Right now, in 1883, the conditions Sinclair will describe are not yet at their worst. They are also very far from good. You work on the killing floor, which means the only direction to start is down. The foreman's name is Grabowski. He's Polish, which you discovered on your first day, and which you thought, briefly, would be an advantage, and which turned out to be irrelevant because Grabowski's relationship with his nationality is entirely pragmatic. He uses it to communicate with the Polish workers, not to show them any particular favour. He's been at the yards for 11 years. He has the posture of a man who has spent 11 years standing on concrete in the cold, slightly forward at the hip, weight distributed carefully, the knees always slightly bent. Kowalczyk, he says as you come through the gate. Shoot 3 today. Yardley's sick. This means you're moving. Shoot 3 is different from your usual position. This is both a small variation in the day and a potential problem, because shoot 3 is a bovine position, and your usual station is hog, and the cattle are heavier, and the work is different, and getting the movement wrong means the line backs up, and the line backing up means Grabowski's neck goes red, and his voice goes hard. You nod. You go to shoot 3. Let me tell you what shoot 3 involves, because the mechanics of this matter, because the mechanics are what's changing your body. The cattle come down the chute in single file. There are men ahead of you in the chain, the men who drive them from the pens, the men who manage the chute itself. And there are men behind you in the chain, the actual killing, the dressing, the carcass line. You're a specific link in a specific chain, and your job is a specific thing. You catch the cattle. This means, as the animal reaches the end of the chute, you're there. You grab the nose ring, if it has one, or the head itself if it doesn't, and you hold it still. You position it for the man behind you with the poleaxe, and you hold it still until he does his job, and then you let go and get ready for the next one. This is approximately what the job description would say. What it doesn't say is that a full-grown steer weighs 1,200 pounds. It doesn't say that the animal coming down the chute can smell what has happened to every animal before it, and responds to this information with the entire biological apparatus available to a 1,200-pound prey animal in extremis. It doesn't say that you will be hit by this animal regularly and without warning, and that the hitting will occur in your hands, your wrists, your shoulders, your ribs, your shins, and that none of these hits will be serious enough to stop the line, and all of them will be serious enough to hurt. Your hands grip the halter. The steer fights. They always fight. This surprises you the first time and stops surprising you by the second week, but it never stops requiring the full commitment of your body. The counterweight of your legs braced against the slick concrete floor, your back taking the torque, your arms absorbing the lateral force as the animal tries to turn, to back up, to simply go anywhere that is not here. You hold. The man behind you does his job. You let go. You reset. You do this again, and again, and again. In the first hour of a morning shift, you will do this approximately 140 times. The rate varies by how well the morning is going. Well means faster. Slow means faster still, because slow means Grabowski's neck, means the foreman from the main office walking the floor with his watch open. The floor is slick. I should have mentioned this first. The floor is always slick. This is not a design flaw, it is design feature, because the floor needs to be washed down regularly, and the material being washed down is blood and fat and the other biological fluids that accompany the process, and none of that is conducive to dry footing. The men here wear particular boots, heavy-soled and studded, that grip the floor better than ordinary leather. Your boots are not these boots. Your boots are the ones you arrived in, resoled once since then at a cost of 20 cents that Tomasz covered for you. And they are not terrible, but they are not right for this floor. You've slipped 3 times. Twice you caught yourself. Once you didn't, and you hit the concrete on your left knee hard enough that you couldn't fully kneel for 2 weeks. And you did not report this, because reporting injuries means losing your position, means losing your pay, means losing everything. And you have already done the math on what losing your pay means, and it does not come out anywhere good. By 7 in the morning your hands are wet, not from water. They will stay wet for the entire shift, and you will not fully warm them again until you get home and stand over the stove, and by then they will have stiffened so completely that the unfurling of your fingers requires conscious effort and produces a sound like a joint crackling all along the knuckle. This is Tuesday. On Tuesday your hands are somewhat recovered from Monday. By Thursday less recovered. By Saturday, the last day of the 6-day week, your hands are simply a fact to be managed rather than a reliable piece of equipment. You hold, you reset. You hold, you reset. The line does not stop. I know I've mentioned the smell. I'm going to mention it again. By 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in November, you are coated in blood. Not dramatically. Not like a battlefield. The blood on the killing floor is business blood, processed blood, blood that has become so routine and so constant that the men who work here stop registering it as blood the way a carpenter stops registering sawdust. It is simply a condition of the environment. It is on your hands, on your forearms, on your apron if you're wearing one today. Some days there are aprons, some days not, depending on the supply room. On the front of your coat where the steer made contact this morning. It smells like iron and salt and something else underneath. Something organic and deep and not quite like anything else. The metabolic smell of a large animal in the final seconds of its life. Here is what nobody prepares you for. You bring this home. You bring it home on your skin, on your clothes, in your hair, under your fingernails. You bring it into the tenement, up the stairs, into the room where Mrs. Kowalska's daughters do their homework at the table, and where Josef sits eating his supper at the other end. By the end of your 2nd month you have stopped smelling it on yourself. By the end of your 4th, you are slightly puzzled when a woman on the street moves away from you on the sidewalk. By 6 months in, you cannot smell the yards at all. Not from the street, not in the building, not on your own hands. You have lost this sense entirely, the way you'd lose a tooth, the way you'd lose anything that's been worn away by constant contact. This is adaptation. The human nose is remarkably good at this. It's designed to habituate to persistent smells, to mark them as background and free up cognitive resources for new information. The cost is that you are carrying a smell that everyone around you, everyone outside of the South Side, everyone north of 31st Street, everyone who takes the Illinois Central Railroad downtown and sits next to you, can smell from 6 feet away. You will not know this for months. This is the first thing the city takes from you, and it is the most invisible. a piece of your ability to know how you appear to the world outside the yards. The bell rings at noon, 30 minutes. This is the lunch break, and it is not a particularly long lunch break, but it is yours, and the degree to which you have come to anticipate it by 11 in the morning is something you would not have predicted about yourself back in Galicia, where a break was just a break, not a fixed point around which the entire morning was mentally organised. The men on your line split off. Some of them have brought food wrapped in cloth or paper. Some of them head to the small commissary building near the eastern gate, where you can buy a bowl of soup for 3 cents and a hunk of bread for another penny. You have brought food. Most days you bring food, because 4 cents a day is 4 cents a day, and 4 cents times 6 days times 50 weeks is $12, and $12 in 1883 is a month's rent for the whole apartment, which is not your rent alone but is someone's rent, and the math of it keeps you making your own lunch even when you are too tired to stand in front of the stove at night. What you have brought is bread, 2 thick slices from yesterday already stiff, wrapped in a piece of newspaper that is also serving as your handkerchief, and a piece of hard cheese, the kind that keeps for weeks without special treatment, that you have been working through since Sunday. You eat sitting on an overturned crate in the narrow corridor between Building 7 and the exterior fence, which is where the wind is partially blocked, and which gets a stripe of weak November sunlight from approximately noon to 12:25 if the sky is clear, which today it is. The cheese is sharp and slightly crystalline on the outside and tastes like home in a way that surprises you every time. Your mother used to make a cheese like this, not the same. It's a Slovak product, bought from a woman on the market on 48th Street, and your mother's cheese was Polish, softer, milder, but close enough that something in your lower brain registers the similarity and produces a brief, involuntary warmth before the rational mind catches up and notes that you're on the wrong continent entirely. Piotr sits next to you. He has soup from the commissary, which he's been saving up for since Saturday. He is very deliberate about when he spends money, Piotr, almost ceremonial about it, treating each purchase as a small event worthy of acknowledgement. Cold today, Piotr says. Yes, you say. Colder tomorrow, he says. This is not conversation. It is a species of companionship, the acknowledgement that there is another human being present, that you are both here, that the day is shared. This is the range of discourse available when you are 30 minutes into a 12-hour shift and have another 6 to go, and every available unit of cognitive energy is being conserved for the afternoon. You eat your bread, you eat your cheese, you drink from your water flask, which is tin and which held something other than water at some previous point in its life that you can still faintly taste if you pay attention. You try not to pay attention. Across the yard, through the fence, a cattle train is pulling in. You can see the animals through the slats of the car, brown and black shapes shifting, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. They've been on that train for maybe 2 days. They've come from Nebraska, or Iowa probably, from ranches where they've spent their lives on open grassland. They are about to enter a place that smells like what happened to everything that came before them. They cannot escape this. They have no choice in it. You look away from the fence. Piotr is finishing his soup, tilting the bowl to get the last of the broth. His face, in the thin noon sunlight, looks tired in a way that is not about today's work specifically. It is a structural tiredness, a tiredness that has been building since he arrived 2 years ago, and that does not reduce meaningfully with sleep anymore, the way a debt gets too large for regular payments to touch the principal. He catches you looking, What? He says. Nothing, you say. Good, he says. The bell rings. 30 minutes. Gone. By 2 o'clock, the morning's initial energy has burned completely through. There is no second wind. People describe second winds as something that happens in physical exertion, the mythical moment where fatigue breaks and capability returns. This is true for some kinds of work. For work that is both physically demanding and repetitive, for work that does not engage the mind beyond the narrow track of its specific requirements, 2 o'clock is simply the beginning of a different phase, not a second wind but a descent. You are running on the reserves now. Your back, which had eased slightly through the morning as the muscles warmed, has tightened back up into its afternoon configuration. The right side of your lower back has a knot in it that responds to palpitation with a specific electric pain that runs down your hip and into your right leg. You've named this pain in your head with a Polish diminutive that roughly translates as old friend, because naming it as a friend was the only way to make it tolerable when it first appeared, and you are now, 4 months in, genuinely somewhat fond of it in the way you're fond of an irritating neighbour who at least is consistent. Your hands grip less efficiently. The calluses are dry, cracking slightly at the joints, and when you close your fist quickly, the skin pulls and threatens to split. You keep your motion smooth. You know by now that a split callus bleeds in a way that is embarrassingly disproportionate to the actual injury, and that blood on the holding station means someone has to stop and wash the station down, and that someone stopping means everyone stopping. And that is the thing you are most committed to preventing. The animals in the afternoon are the same animals as in the morning. The line does not vary. Your position in it does not vary. And yet the afternoon animals feel heavier. This is not physiology. A 1,200-pound steer at 2 in the afternoon weighs exactly what it weighed at 8 in the morning. But it is true in the way that truth works when your body is the one doing the measuring. Your feet are past pain now and into numbness, which is better, except when you stumble on the wet floor and the numbness becomes a liability because you can't feel where your weight is distributed, and catching yourself requires a small, ugly lunge that catches Grabowski's eye from across the floor. He looks at you. You straighten. You reset. He looks away. This is the relationship. It is not adversarial. Grabowski is not a villain. He is a man with his own pressures, his own numbers to meet, his own neck that goes red when the foreman from the main office walks the floor with his watch open. He pushes because the job requires pushing. You push back as much as the job requires resisting. This is not a conflict. It is a negotiation between two men who both understand the constraints they're operating within. You staying on after, says the man on your left. His name is Andrei, and he is from the same general region of Galicia as you, which in the logic of the yards makes you practically brothers. No, you say, overtime is 12 cents extra. I know. You know. 12 cents is more than you can easily turn down. 12 cents times 3 overtime sessions a week is 36 cents, which is approximately 35% of your daily wage, which is significant. But overtime means going home at 9 instead of 6, means eating cold food if there's food, or no food if there isn't, means the walk home in full dark, which is a different proposition from the walk home at 6 with the last grey light still in the sky, means that Tomasz, who comes home at the same time as you, and who makes the same calculation about overtime every week, is also going to be tired, and you will sit in the apartment together in the specific silence of two people who are too tired for conversation. Maybe Thursday, you say? Andrei shrugs. He will stay. He has a wife in Galicia he's trying to bring over. He has a specific number he needs and a specific timeline, and every overtime hour moves the number slightly, and he stays every time, always, without variation, and you respect this about him. The afternoon grinds through. 3 o'clock, 4. The light in the yard changes, what there is of it, diffuse and grey and weakened by the coal smoke horizon, shifts toward afternoon quality, that particular flat grey of a Chicago winter afternoon that has no gold in it, no warmth, just a slow darkening toward evening. 5 o'clock. The bell. The end of the regular shift. Your body understands the bell before your brain does. Something releases, a tension you have been holding in your lower back and shoulders that was not conscious but was absolutely physical, a bracing against the work that you've been maintaining for 11 hours. It releases and you feel, briefly, 20 years older. Then you straighten and you begin to feel just the regular age of exhaustion, which is somewhat better. The men come out of the yards in groups, the way men always come out of long-shared work, loosened slightly from the day's compression, voices returning, the accumulated details of hours finding their way into exchange. Did you hear about the accident on the south floor? You did not hear. Tell me. Morozowski got his hand in the gear mechanism, lost 2 fingers. A pause. A collective pause. The way a group of men who use their hands for everything pause when they hear about a man losing parts of his hands. He'll keep his position. Grabowski says yes, if he can still work with 8. This is the other calculation, not just the wage and the overtime, but the cost-benefit of injury. Can you still perform your specific function? Does the machine still run with a slightly different version of you inside it? If yes, you stay. If no, and this is the thing that nobody talks about, the thing that lies underneath all the other calculations, if no, you are out. There are men waiting at the gate every morning, new arrivals off the trains from New York, off the boats from Hamburg. The yards have no shortage of people wanting to trade their bodies for wages. This knowledge is ambient, the way the smell is ambient. You don't think about it consciously, but it informs every decision you make, the way you hold a little more carefully, the way you pay attention to the floor, the way you do not take risks that are avoidable. Morozowski had an unavoidable risk become actual. This happens. You absorb the news and you file it and you keep walking. The street is the same street you walked this morning, and it is completely different. The light is different, obviously. What little there was is now gone, replaced by the light from the gas lamps that line the main streets and are entirely absent from the side streets and alleys, and the gate of the yards opens onto a side street. Your eyes adjust. Your feet know the way. The mud is the same mud, though it has had all day to be walked through and is now more thoroughly worked than this morning. The patches you step around still in their roughly approximate positions, but with new contributions from the afternoon, fresh from the pens, impossible to fully avoid. You stop at the pump in the yard. You wash your hands. This is not a thorough wash. There is no facility here for a thorough wash. No hot water, no soap, no change of clothing. It is a perfunctory wash, the kind of wash that removes the surface layer and makes the hands feel slightly less as if they belong to someone who's been working in a slaughterhouse all day, even though they do and they have. On warm evenings, there is often a group of men from the yards who stop at the saloon on the corner of 47th and Wood. There is always alcohol in the back of the yards, always, because the saloon is one of the few social institutions available, and because 11 hours of work in a place that smells like this creates a very specific desire to do something that is not that. and alcohol is cheap and available and provides a few hours of genuine relief from the accumulated weight of the day. You stop at the saloon sometimes, not every day. You have the same relationship with this calculation as with overtime, always running the numbers against the costs, but sometimes, on bad days, on days when the smell of the apartment feels like a continuation of the smell of the yards rather than an escape from it. Tonight is a Tuesday. Tuesdays you go home. You turn onto Halstead Street. I'm going to jump forward now. Not far, but far enough to tell you about the cold. You've been here since September. September was a revelation. The summer had left some warmth in the city, and the yards in mild weather are at least one thing before they're another, and the walk to work and the walk home could be done in shirt sleeves if you wanted, which you didn't because you'd already learned about the smell and the blood and the importance of protective layers. But the point is, it was tolerable. The apartment was a furnace by August, the whole building holding heat the way brick buildings hold heat in summer, every window open, the air still thick but at least moving. October got colder. You watched the other men, the ones who'd been here longer, and you noted how they dressed, what they added, what they kept on through the day, and you took this as instruction. November you mostly described. Let me tell you about December. December in Chicago is a different physics than December anywhere else you've been. The city sits at the southern end of Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is one of the Great Lakes, the fifth largest lake in the world, and it has roughly the same effect on Chicago's winters as a giant refrigerator left open on the doorstep. The wind comes off the water, the eponymous wind, and it is not just cold, it is specifically targeted. It finds the gaps in everything, the gap between your collar and your neck, the gap between your gloves and your sleeve, the gap in the construction of the building that lets a thin draft move through the apartment at ankle height all night. The temperature in December can drop to -15 Celsius. It frequently does. Add the wind chill from the lake, and you are looking at conditions that in many environments would be considered genuinely dangerous to be outside in for extended periods. You're outside in them for extended periods. So is everyone in the back of the yards. Your layering system, developed over October and November, is first layer, the rough linen undershirt which had been washed twice in the past month in cold water and is losing its structural coherence. Second layer, a knit wool vest bought second-hand from the pawn shop on 48th Street, slightly too small that you wear until the wool fibres mat into, felt from contact and sweat, and the peculiar chemistry of the yards. Third layer, your shirt, a work shirt, rough cotton, patched at the elbows. Fourth layer, your coat, the one that was your uncle's and before that someone else's, the one that is the most important piece of equipment you own. On particularly cold mornings, you add a fifth layer, a length of coarse wool wrapped around your chest inside the coat like bandaging, which sounds absurd and looks absurd and works remarkably well. Your hands, cotton work gloves inside thicker wool ones, both pairs perforated from the work so that your fingertips show through in several places. You've been meaning to repair the inner pair for 3 weeks. You've not repaired the inner pair. When you get home at 6 o'clock, the idea of threading a needle is not a thing your hands can execute. Your feet, the problem of your feet has not been fully solved. The newspaper stuffing works to a degree. In the coldest weather it does not work enough. By the second week of December, your toes are a project of management rather than sensation. You watch them in the evenings, checking the colour, the feeling, the circulation. You know men at the yards who lost toes to frostbite years ago, and who joke about it in the particular way of men who have converted an injury into a personality trait. But you are not interested in acquiring this personality trait. You warm your feet every evening over the small stove. This process takes about 45 minutes and involves a specific kind of pain. The pain of blood returning to cold tissue. That is one of the more unpleasant sensations in your daily catalogue, and the catalogue is extensive. Tomasz has the same routine. You warm your feet at opposite ends of the stove, not speaking, the apartment gradually defrosting around you, Mrs. Kowalska's daughters doing their homework at the table, the unnamed man in the corner apparently immune to cold and cold's concerns. "I need new boots," you say one evening. Tomasz considers this. "How much are you short?" You've done the math. 40 cents. He doesn't answer immediately. 40 cents is not nothing. 40 cents is 3 days' worth of Mrs. Bzoska's coffee. 40 cents is most of your contribution to the shared food budget for a week. "I have 30, he says finally. "Can you get 10 from Andrei?" You can. Andrei will have it in advance against the Thursday overtime he knows you'll eventually take. By the end of that week you have new boots. Or rather, you have boots that are new to you, bought from a man on the market who has slightly larger feet than you and who is upgrading. And they are warm and properly soled and fit correctly, and the relief this produces is disproportionate to the act of simply having appropriate footwear. The relief is almost emotional, and you walk home from the market on the Saturday with a sense of well-being that the city has not produced in you for weeks. This is what you've learned about Chicago. The body runs the math. Warm feet equals better, clearer thinking. Full stomach equals capacity for tolerance. These are not metaphors. They are causal relationships, mechanical, biological, real. When the body is managed, when the cold is addressed, the hunger met, the pain reduced to its minimum possible level, the mind has room to function. When it isn't, the mind contracts. The entire cognitive operation narrows to the immediate, the practical, the next meal-size piece of problem. This is the city's great sorting mechanism. Not ability, not intelligence, not character. Those things matter, but they operate inside constraints set by the body. Constrain the body hard enough, and the best mind of the world is mostly thinking about feet. There is a man named Alderman Chernik. He is Polish, like you, and unlike Grabowski's pragmatic nationality, Chernik's Polishness is a central feature of his political operation. He holds the ward that contains the back of the yards, and he has held it for 6 years, and the way he holds it is the way ward bosses hold their wards throughout Chicago in this period, which is through an exchange of resources and favour so explicit that it barely qualifies as corruption. It is simply a parallel civic structure, operating under its own rules, providing services the formal government does not. You meet Chernik in December at the parish hall of St. Adalbert's, at a meeting ostensibly about the state of the roads in the neighbourhood. The roads are genuinely terrible. The roads require legitimate address. But this is also a meeting about the upcoming city council election, about which candidates Chernik is endorsing, about the mechanics of how the Polish community will vote, and why voting in the right direction is an act of collective self-interest, and about what Chernik's organisation provides in return, what it provides. If you need a job, not at the yards, which finds its own labour, but at a city contract position, a streets department job, a dock work job, Chernik can help. If you're in trouble with the law, a fight, a misunderstanding, a situation that has been mischaracterized by someone outside the community, Chernik's man at the precinct knows your case. If your family is coming from Galicia and they need help finding a room, finding work, navigating the process of a new country, Chernik's organisation has men who specialise in exactly this, who know which ship agents to trust and which are swindlers, which boarding houses are honest and which will take your money and leave you on the street. In return, you vote how he tells you. You don't need to particularly believe in the candidate. You just need to show up on election day and mark the correct box, and Chernik's men will be at the polling place to make sure you know which box is correct. This is Chicago politics in 1883. It is not admirable in the abstract. In the concrete, in the specific, in the lived experience of a 17-year-old Polish boy who doesn't speak much English, and who has nobody looking out for him, but the informal networks of his community and whatever formal structures choose to acknowledge him. In this concrete reality, Chernik is not corruption. Chernik is a resource. You vote in April when the city elections come. You vote how Chernik said to vote. You don't know anything about the candidates except that one is apparently better for the Polish community than the other, which is Chernik's assessment and may be true, or may be a function of who is paying whom what, and you cannot tell the difference, and you have no particular mechanism for finding out. But here is what you get. In January, when the city begins a road improvement project on 47th Street, laying wooden plank road surface over the worst mud sections, the project starts with the block between Halstead and Wood, which is your block, which is one of the worst stretches in the neighbourhood. The road does not become good. Wooden plank roads deteriorate rapidly in Chicago's winters and need constant replacement, and eventually the city moves to something better. But for 6 months, the walk to the yards is slightly less of a mud negotiation, and you lose slightly less of your boots to the daily submersion, and the small pragmatic improvement of this is real. You begin to understand how the city actually runs, not through the abstract civic mechanisms, not through the Tribune's editorials about honest government, but through these small exchanges, through the mutual recognition of who needs what and who can provide it, through the web of obligation and favour that holds the working neighbourhoods together because there is nothing else holding them together. No welfare, no unemployment insurance, no social security, no OSHA, no workers' compensation. If you're injured at the yards are not responsible. If you are sick, there is no sick leave. If you die, your family has whatever you had saved, which, if you've been here less than a year, is somewhere between very little and nothing. What you have is each other. What you have is Chernik, and the church, and the neighbourhood networks, and the informal economy of favours and debts and mutual recognition. You have the saloon on 47th, where the men from the yards gather, and where information moves, and where, crucially, Chernik's organisation is always present, always listening, always available to connect resource to need. This is not nothing. This is, in fact, almost everything. There is a family on the second floor, the Nowakowskis. The father works at the soap works. The mother takes in laundry. There are 4 children, Marizia, who is 12, Tadeusz, who is 9, the twins Kazimierz and Bolesław, who are 5. In the first week of February, Tadeusz stops going to school. You don't notice this immediately. You don't have a particular relationship with the Nowakowski family, beyond nodding in the hallway, beyond the small reciprocal gestures of building life, holding the door, acknowledging the pump. What you notice first is that Mrs. Nowakowska looks worse than usual, which is saying something because Mrs. Nowakowska has been operating in a state of compressed exhaustion since you arrived. Then you hear about Tadeusz. Typhoid, says Piotr at work when you mention it. Maybe. They haven't had the doctor. They won't have the doctor. The doctor costs. This is the arithmetic again. A doctor call costs money. Medicine costs money. The hospital on 26th Street, Cook County Hospital, which does take charity cases, is 3 miles away, and getting there requires either walking or paying for a streetcar. And if you're sick enough to need the hospital, you're probably too sick to walk 3 miles, and the streetcar costs a nickel each way. Tadeus doesn't have typhoid. He has something respiratory. The doctor, when finally called 2 weeks later, calls it by a Latin name that neither you nor Tomasz understands, but the cough and the fever and the particular way the boy sounds in the nights through the floor below, that thin, persistent, exhausting sound, suggest your lungs, the same lungs that have been inhaling the yard's air and the tenement air and the coal smoke since September. The building shifts around this. Mrs. Kowalska starts boiling vinegar water to put in the hallway, a disinfectant measure of questionable efficacy but genuine intention. The men on your floor are more careful about the pump, about not touching their faces, about the surfaces they touch in the common areas. You know about disease in a theoretical way. Cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis are words you know, and you know they kill people, and you know they travel through bad water and bad air and close quarters. You are living in bad water and bad air and close quarters, all three simultaneously, and there is essentially nothing you can do about any of it. You cannot move. You cannot afford to move, and even if you could, the building you'd move to would be substantially similar. You cannot improve the water. The pump in the yard is the city's responsibility, and the city's improvement schedule is Chernik dependent. You cannot fix the air. What you can do is what everyone in the building does. You are careful. You wash your hands more, or try to, when the pump isn't frozen. You eat the hot food rather than the cold food. You wear your layers. Tadeusz recovers in March. The building exhales. But in March, on the floor above yours, the old man who lives alone, Dziadek Malinowski, who came here in 1872, and who has been here longer than anyone else in the building, and who sits by his window on Sundays watching the street below, with an expression of philosophical neutrality. Dziadek Malinowski develops a cough that does not recover. You hear it at night. Through the ceiling, through the floorboards, a thin insulation of plaster and wood. A dry, rattling cough, persistent. 3 in the morning, 4 every night. By April, the cough has a different character, wetter, more sustained. By May, you rarely see him at the window anymore. This is tuberculosis. You don't know this for certain. No one in the building uses the word, but you all know what that cough sounds like. You all grew up in places where that cough had a name and the name had a one-way direction. In June, Dziadek Malinowski's nephew comes from Milwaukee to take him there, where there is apparently a better situation, more family, a lower floor. You help carry his few possessions down the stairs, a trunk, a chair, 2 boxes. He weighs almost nothing when you help him into the wagon. He is light in the way that large things become light when they are mostly gone. "Thank you," he says in Polish. Clear and formal. You nod. You watch the wagon go down. Halstead Street. His room is re-rented within a week. A young couple from Galicia just arrived, looking round the building with the expressions you recognize from your own first arrival. Wide, slightly frightened, already beginning to contract around the edges as reality announces itself. You watch them come up the stairs with their small bundle of possessions. You want to tell them something useful. What you can't quite articulate is this: the city is survivable, not easy, not kind, but survivable. And the survival is worth more than the difficulty costs probably, or at least you've decided to believe this, which amounts to the same thing. You hold the door for them. May 4th, 1886. Okay, I need to explain something. You've been in Chicago for 2.5 years now in this story, so we've moved the timeline forward slightly from where we started. I'm doing this on purpose, because what happens in May of 1886 is the single most important event in the history of American labor, and it happens in Chicago. And if you are a worker in Chicago's back of the yards in this period, it does not happen abstractly to you. It happens in a way that rearranges everything. Let me back up. Let me take you to spring first and to what has been building. For months, more than months really, for years, but the months immediately before have a specific heat to them. The workers in Chicago's industrial neighborhoods have been organizing around one demand: the 8-hour workday. You work 12 hours, sometimes more, with overtime, 6 days a week. The 12-hour day is not a law, it is not a contract, it is simply the terms that the yards and the factories impose, and because there are always more men at the gate than there are positions, the terms don't require justification. You work the hours they set or you don't work. The 8-hour movement says, this is not right. The 8-hour movement says, a man has a right to 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, and 8 hours for what he will. The movement has been building since the early 1880s, growing in Chicago's German and Polish and Czech neighborhoods, in the meeting halls and the union offices, and the saloons where men who work 12 hours a day gather to talk about what else their lives could contain. You've been to 3 meetings at the hall on 45th Street. The men who speak there are compelling, electrically, angrily compelling, and what they say is true. You know it's true because you live it. You know that 12 hours is too many. You know that 6 days out of 7 is too many. You know that the math of your wages against your hours produces a number that allows survival, but does not produce anything beyond survival, and that this is a design feature, not an accident. You carry these thoughts back to the yards on Monday morning. You carry them into the position at chute 3, into the hold and reset of the 11-hour day. On May 1st, 1886, a general strike begins across Chicago. 80,000 workers stop working. The McCormick Reaper Works, the Pullman car shops, lumber yards, foundries, factories across the industrial South Side. The yards slow, not stop. The yards never fully stop. The process of American meat consumption doesn't pause for labor disputes, but slow. There are men who don't show up. Grabowski's face is a study in controlled tension. He doesn't say anything about the strike. He doesn't say anything about anything. He just runs the floor with slightly fewer men and slightly more visible strain. On May 3rd at the McCormick plant on Blue Island Avenue, the police shoot into a crowd of striking workers. 2 men are killed, several more are wounded. The name you hear first is August Spies. He's a newspaper editor, a German labour organiser, and he has been at the McCormick confrontation. And that evening he writes a circular in German and English that is printed and distributed across the city. Working men to arms. On the evening of May 4th, there is a meeting at Haymarket Square. Not far from here, a mile, maybe, from the tenement, in the market square between Randolph and Des Plaines. You go. You go because Piotr is going, and because Tomasz is going, and because something has been building in you for 2 years that you don't have a precise name for. Something that is not quite anger, not quite ambition, but something in between, something that recognizes an imbalance and has been storing the recognition in the specific muscles of your back and your hands every single working day for 26 months. The meeting is large, and then it is not. The mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison, comes, watches for a while, decides it is peaceful enough, and leaves. The police, watching from a block away, disagree with this assessment. It is raining. The crowd has thinned from its peak. The weather, the late hour, to maybe 200 or 300 people listening to the last speaker. Then the police advance. Then a bomb goes off. The bomb comes from somewhere in the crowd, or maybe from the building fronts. No one ever definitively proves who threw it, and it kills one police officer instantly and injures dozens more. The police open fire. The crowd scatters. In the chaos of the next few minutes, 7 police officers are killed. Most, later evidence suggests, by gunfire from their own colleagues in the dark and confusion. And at least 4 civilians are killed, with dozens wounded. You are not in the centre of this. You're at the back of the crowd, near the edge, and when the bomb goes off, the specific, hard, concussive sound of it, so different from anything you've heard before, so much more definitive than a gun. Your body moves before your mind gives the instruction. You run. Everybody runs. The street is bodies and screaming and the sound of boots on wet cobblestones and rain, and the particular quality of panic that occurs when a crowd of people in a compressed space all decide simultaneously that they need to be somewhere else. You run. You reach an alley. You stop. You put your hand against the brick wall and you breathe. Piotr is beside you. His face is the colour of unfinished wood. He is not saying anything. Tomasz is not here. The air smells of smoke and something sharper. Gunpowder. The yards have never produced this smell, and it is going to be a long time before you can smell it without your legs wanting to move. Tomasz, you say. Piotr shakes his head, not indicating anything terrible, indicating he doesn't know. You wait. Tomasz appears at the end of the alley 7 minutes later, slightly bleeding from a cut on his forehead that looks worse than it is, the kind of cut heads produce easily, and he is walking quickly and looking behind him, and when he sees you, he does something that you have only seen him do once before, at the ship in Bremerhaven when you both stood at the railing and watched the European coast disappear. Behind you, he exhales like a man releasing something he's been holding for a long time. "We should go," he says. You go. The aftermath of Haymarket is not immediate clarity. It is the opposite. 8 men are arrested and charged with murder. Not the bomb thrower, who is never definitively identified, but the organisers, the editors, the labour leaders, on the theory that their words created the conditions for the bomb. The trial is a spectacle. The verdict is not a surprise. 4 men are hanged. 1 takes his own life in prison. 3 others receive prison sentences. The labour movement in Chicago and across the country is broken by this. Not immediately. The 8-hour movement continues. The unions persist. But it is broken in the way that a bone is broken when you can still use the limb, but something has shifted inside and the weight lands differently. At the yards, nothing is said. Grabowski never mentions it. You never mention it. But you notice the men at the Union Meeting Hall on 45th Street are more careful now. They speak more quietly. They check who is at the back of the room. The meetings are smaller. Something tightened in the city after May 4th. Some civic muscle contracted and is not fully released. You file this too. You put it in the same place you filed the other large things. The cow's eye that watched you at Shoot 3 on your very first day. The sound of Dziadek Malinowski's cough. The look on Mrs. Nowakowska's face in those 2 weeks when Tadeusz was sick. The body as ledger. recording what the city costs. In July, Grabowski sends you downtown on an errand. This is unusual. The yards mostly generate their own paperwork, manage their own supply lines, exist as a self-contained world with its own commerce and relationships and geography. You don't often have reason to go north of 31st Street, but there's a supplier on Lake Street. A tooling company, something about replacement parts for the chute mechanism, and Grabowski wants it handled in person because there's a dispute about the last order that he doesn't want to resolve by letter, and he wants someone who can speak basic English. Your English has been improving. It has been improving in the way that things improve when survival depends on them. Rapidly, practically, focused on the specific vocabulary of the thing you need it for. You can negotiate prices. You can describe a problem with machinery. You can navigate a city conversation, the abbreviated civic exchange of how much and where is and I'm looking for. You cannot discuss philosophy in English. You cannot describe your inner life in English. But you can go to Lake Street and handle a dispute about a parts order. You take the streetcar. The streetcar is, in itself, an experience. A horse-drawn car on metal rails, running up Clark Street from 35th all the way to the Loop, crowded at 8 in the morning with men in better coats than yours and women with hats that represent more craft and consideration than anything you've seen since you left Galicia. The city changes as you go north. The smoke is still everywhere. Chicago smoke is omnipresent. But the buildings change. The streets are paved properly with stone. The sidewalks exist and are maintained. The storefronts have glass fronts and painted signs and display windows with arrangements of goods that are meant to be looked at, not just acquired. The smell changes. This is the one that catches you. At 31st Street, you cross an invisible line, and the smell of the yards diminishes. Not immediately, not completely. Is in your coat, in your hair, but the ambient background smell of the street itself is different. Coal smoke, horse manure. The streets are full of horses. Chicago's not yet electric in 1886. The L trains don't run yet and won't for 3 years. And underneath that, the lake smell from the east, clean water and something cold. You sit on the streetcar and you look out at the city as it passes. You have been in this city for almost 3 years. You have lived in a 4-block radius of Halstead and 47th for almost 3 years. You've been to the river twice. You've been to the parish hall, the saloon, the market, the pump, the yards. This is your Chicago. North of 31st, Chicago is a different city entirely. The Loop, the area bounded by the elevated railroad tracks that will be completed in a few years, but already called the Loop because that's what the cable car line does here. The Loop is where Chicago keeps its ambitions. The Board of Trade, the banks, Marshall Field's, on State Street, the most magnificent department store in America, a palace of retail 8 stories tall with an atrium and gaslighting and carpeted floors, and clerks who speak in murmurs and merchandise so beautifully arranged it resembles art more than commerce. You don't go into Marshall Field's, you have no business there, and your coat has a particular smell that would announce you from the door. But you walk past it. You look at the window displays, summer fabrics, the arranged domestic scenes, the kind of life that these arrangements are advertising. This is where the money from the yards goes, not to the men at Chute 3, not to Piotr or Andrei, or the man whose name you've never caught. It flows north, through the Board of Trade where the cattle and pork futures are traded, where men in suits buy and sell the animals before they've arrived, before they've been processed, pricing the labour of your hands before your hands have performed it. Through the banks, on LaSalle Street, where the packers keep their accounts, into the mansions on Prairie Avenue, where Philip Armour and Gustavus Swift live, where the money from 1,000,000 processed animals has been converted into carved stone facades and carriage houses and domestic staffs and the kind of furniture that you have seen in pictures but never in life. You stand on State Street in front of Marshall Fields for maybe 2 minutes, which is longer than you intend to stand there, and you are aware of yourself as a figure in this landscape. The coat, the boots, better now, the new ones from February. The hands that no longer look like anything except working hands. The particular way you've learned to stand from 2.5 years of standing in the same position for 11 hours a day. A delivery boy on a bicycle nearly runs into you, and you step aside and the moment breaks. You find the tooling supplier on Lake Street, you handle the dispute. Your English is sufficient. The supplier is not entirely pleased, but not entirely displeased, and there is a compromise price that Grabowski will accept. And you write it down on the piece of paper he gave you, and you thank the man and you leave. On the way back to the streetcar, you pass the Chicago River at Lake Street Bridge. The river in summer is at its most characteristic. The flow was reversed by engineering in 1900. Meanders redirected south, so Chicago's sewage goes to the Illinois River instead of Lake Michigan. But in 1886, the river still flows east into the lake, and it contains everything the city deposits in it. The rendering works, the soap works, the gas works, the tanneries. And underneath all of that, the water itself, brown-green, slow-moving, throwing off a heat-amplified smell that has its own distinct character from the yard smell, the building smell, the coal smoke smell. The bridge has people on it, businessmen crossing, a woman with a basket, a man fishing, which seems optimistic but perhaps isn't, depending on what he intends to do with what he catches. You lean on the railing for a moment. Below you, the river. Behind you, the loop. Ahead of you, the streetcar south, the yards, the evening shift if Grabowski wants it. You think about your uncle's letter, the one that arrived 3 months ago from a cousin who is moving to Milwaukee. The letter said Milwaukee is cleaner, less smell. The work is different, not the yards but a brewery, and the work is indoor work, and the smell is yeast and hops rather than blood and bone. You've been thinking about that letter for 3 months. You think about it now, on the bridge, looking at the river. And then you think about the 6 months of wages you've managed to save. Not much, but more than nothing. The first real accumulation of capital you've achieved, living in a room with 4 other men and eating bread and hard cheese and going to the saloon once a week rather than 3 times. You think about what that money represents. A possibility, the beginning of a trajectory. The city doesn't tell you what to do with it. The city simply continues around you, enormous and indifferent and full of possibility and full of cost, and the combination of those 2 things, possibility and cost, exactly balanced, is what Chicago is, and what Chicago has always been, and what it will continue to be long after you and Tomasz and Piotr and Grabowski and Alderman Chernik and Mrs. Brzozowska with her coffee cart have become the kind of people who get footnotes in labour histories. You straighten. You turn away from the river. You take the streetcar south. It's September again, 1 year. You're standing at the pump in the yard at 6 in the morning, waiting your turn, and you're thinking, 1 year. Let me tell you what the ledger says. Your hands. You've already described the calluses, the cracks, the altered grip. There is something else now. The right hand, the dominant hand, the one that grips most often and tightest and longest. There is a slight thickening at the base of the ring and middle fingers that the old doctor at the free clinic on 48th Street, who you visited once when the cracking was bad enough to affect your grip, called by a Latin name and dismissed with a shrug as occupational. It does not hurt. It limits your range of motion by perhaps 10 degrees in certain positions. You have accommodated this so completely that you wouldn't have noticed it if the doctor hadn't pointed to it. Your weight. You left Galicia at approximately 60 kilograms, which is light for your height. The thinness of a young man from a family that ate adequately but not abundantly. You're now heavier, not dramatically. 4 kilograms, maybe 5. But the composition is different. The soft tissue of your original body has been replaced by something denser. Your arms are visibly larger. Your back, when you occasionally catch yourself in the small section of mirror above the basin, shows muscle you didn't have before, defined by the specific demands of your specific work. You also have the lean. The priest mentioned it in January, and you have not been able to fully correct it since. Your right side is noticeably more developed than your left. The lean is subtle, maybe 3 degrees from vertical, but it is there. Your lungs. You cough in the mornings. You have learned to do this quickly and productively and to stop thinking about it. The doctor at the free clinic, the same visit, listened to your chest and said something non-committal in accented English. You heard some inflammation, and not unusual, and reduce exposure if possible. The last instruction produced a look between you that contained everything that needed to be said about the relationship between medical advice and economic necessity. Your feet. Better. Since the new boots. The arches remain compromised. You know this because on Sundays, when you walk farther than your usual routes, to the church, to the market on 48th, sometimes to the river, your feet tire before the rest of you, which was not previously the case. Your back. The pain is structural now. It does not dramatically worsen or improve. It is a fixture of morning, manageable by afternoon, returned by evening. You have a relationship with it that is more than tolerance, something like the relationship you'd have with any long-term companion, requiring acknowledgement and management but no longer demanding surprise. Your sense of smell, substantially gone, as described. You cannot smell the yards. You cannot smell yourself. You can smell food, the olfactory response to potential nutrition being apparently the last to habituate. But the ambient background information that smell normally provides has been simplified to the point of unreliability. Your sleep. You go down fast and you go down deep, and you surface in the morning with the quality of emergence from deep water, slowly and with resistance. This is not a complaint. The speed of your sleep is an achievement of physical exhaustion, the body claiming what it is owed. But you do not dream very much anymore, or if you do, the dreams are brief and functional and leave no impression. You don't miss them, you barely notice. What has been added? Your English. Functional, practical, increasingly flexible. You can now negotiate in English, argue in English, make simple jokes in English. The jokes are mostly about the cold and the mud, which are the two things in Chicago that serve as universal social currency across the language barriers. Your knowledge of the city. You know the streets the way you know the back of your hand, which is to say with an intimate physical familiarity that bypasses description. You simply know. You know which butchers on 47th sell the best offcuts on Saturdays. You know which saloons are owned by Chernick's men and which ones are independent. You know the pump schedule, the building's rhythms, the social topography of the block. Your money, $47. This is more money than you have ever had. This is 3 months of rent for the whole apartment, which is not your rent alone, but is, as mentioned, real money. And it represents not just savings, but a kind of biographical fact. You are a person who can save money in Chicago, which is not nothing. Your relationships, Tomasz is the most important. Piotr is close. Andrzej has become a friend in the specific way that men who stand next to each other in physical danger for long periods become friends, not through shared interest or conversation, but through the accumulated trust of presence. Mrs. Kowalska, who has started leaving a plate of soup for you and Tomasz on Thursday evenings, which she says is surplus from dinner and which is not surplus from dinner, but which is a generosity offered in the form of practicality because she is determined that 2 young men who clearly don't eat enough on weeknights need surplus soup. The unnamed man in the corner, whose name you've finally learned is Bogdan, who works at something he doesn't describe and who has, in 1 year, offered exactly 4 pieces of information about himself. His name, his city of origin, Krakow, his preference for the left side of the stove, and his opinion that Chicago winters are worse than anything in Poland, which he delivered as a fact, requiring no elaboration, and which you have never argued with. These are your people, not chosen people, not the people you would have designed if you'd been designing a life, the people the city gave you. There's one thing I haven't told you yet. In November, the 2nd November now, the November of your 2nd year, you went with Tomasz to the north side on a Sunday, not for any particular reason. You had read, in a Polish-language newspaper, about the water tower on Michigan Avenue, and Tomasz had heard about it from someone at work, and it seemed like a thing to do on a Sunday when the weather was clear, and the idea of spending the entire day in the apartment in the particular compressed company of 11 people was something neither of you had the capacity for. The water tower is one of the few buildings that survived the Great Fire of 1871. Everything around it burned. The entire north side of Chicago, approximately 17,000 buildings, reduced to rubble and ash in 36 hours, and the water tower stood. It's limestone, which doesn't burn the way the wood frame buildings burned, but there's something symbolic in the survival of it that Chicago has seized on, the way a city that burned to the ground and rebuilt itself in 12 years seizes on any available symbol of persistence. You take the streetcar north, which is already a different experience than the one you know. The North Side streetcar has a different demographic, different clothes, a quieter and more deliberate atmosphere. You're conspicuous in your coat. You try not to care. Michigan Avenue in November is cold and beautiful. The lake is to your right, grey-green and enormous, the far shore so distant it's indistinguishable from the horizon. The wind comes off it in long, sustained gusts that grab your coat and try to take it. The water tower sits in the middle of a small park. It is not large, 60 feet maybe, but it has a particular quality, a medieval castle quality, with its Gothic turrets and its rough limestone face, completely at odds with everything around it, the modest precursor to what Chicago will eventually build on these avenues. You stand in front of it for a while. You think about what it means to survive a fire that destroys everything around you. Whether survival is a quality of the thing itself or simply a function of circumstances, the limestone was not brave, it simply did not burn. But that distinction is perhaps less important than the fact of still being there. You think about Galicia, which you have not thought about directly in several months because direct thought about it produces a specific ache that is not productive and which you have learned to root around. But standing here in front of the water tower, with the cold lake wind in your face and your body changed, and your savings accumulating in the tobacco tin in the trunk under the bed, you think about it. You're not the person who arrived. That person, 17 years old, terrified, carrying a letter of introduction in a language he barely spoke, smelling the yards for the first time from the train. That person would not recognize the person standing here. This is not entirely a loss. Tomasz is saying something. He's talking about Milwaukee again, about the brewery, about the cousin's letter. You listen. Would you go? You ask. He thinks. He looks at the lake. Not yet, he says. But maybe. Maybe. The most Chicago of answers. A city built entirely on maybe. Maybe this. Maybe someday. Maybe the second year is better than the first. Sometimes it is. You stand there until your feet remind you that the new boots are good but not magical, and then you take the streetcar back south and you are home by 5, and Mrs. Kowalska has made bigos, hunter's stew, cabbage and scraps of pork, and the apartment smells like food and warmth, and the particular kind of ordinary peace that is the best thing a difficult day can end with. Bogdan is at the stove. Good, he says, nodding at the pot. Smells good, you say. He nods, satisfied. This is the longest conversation you will have with Bogdan this month. It's Sunday evening, late. The apartment is quiet. Mrs. Kowalska's daughters are asleep in the main room. You can hear them breathing, the even, untroubled breathing of children who have found their way to sleep without difficulty. Bogdan is already in his corner, still as furniture. Tomasz is reading. He has picked up the habit of reading English newspapers slowly with the dictionary, treating each page as a project. By the light of the candle on the windowsill, you're lying on the straw mattress looking at the ceiling. The ceiling has a water stain that has been there since you arrived. It has not grown, which is either a success or an indication that whatever caused it is no longer active. The shape has not changed. You know it as well as you know the feel of the mattress under you as well as you. Know the sound the stairwell makes at midnight as well as you know the 3-block walk to the pump and back. Chicago is quieter on Sunday nights. Not quiet. It is never quiet, but quieter. The yards are running with a smaller crew. The saloons are open but past their peak. The streetcars are running but sparse. Somewhere in the distance, over toward the yards, a cow is making a sound. Not in distress, not that which you would recognize. Just a sound, an animal sound, the ambient background noise of 10,000 animals in the pens. It drifts in through the small window with the cold air. You close your eyes. Tomorrow is Monday. Monday means 5 o'clock bells, means the pump and the bread and the chicory water, means the walk in whatever weather November has for you, means shoot 3, or your regular station depending on Grabowski's arrangements, means 11 hours of hold and reset and hold and reset, means the small wars of the body against the work and the work, against the body and the daily renegotiation of what is tolerable and what is not. It means Piotr eating his commissary soup at noon. It means Andrei's particular way of breathing when the work gets heavy, like a bellows, slow and rhythmic. It means the afternoon descent and the evening bell and the walk home through mud or mud becoming snow, and the pump in the yard and the hand washing and the stairs. It means all of it again. This is not despair. I want to be clear about that. This is the rhythm that has become your life, and life has the property of containing its own sufficiency. What I mean is, you have enough in this life to make it worth the living. Enough warmth, barely. Enough food, mostly. Enough company, unexpectedly. the specific companionship of people who share your conditions and who have no investment in pretending those conditions are different from what they are. You have the $47 in the tobacco tin. You have the English that's getting better. You have the body that has been rewritten by the work, that carries in its calluses and its altered posture and its flattened arches and its compromised sense of smell, the full text of what you have done here. Every hour you have traded for wages. Every morning you have walked to the yards in the dark. This body is yours. The city made it, and you made it, and the two of you have been in negotiation about it every day for a year. You are still here. The steer at shoot 3 on your very first day, the one that turned and caught you in the ribs before you'd learned the position. You still think about that sometimes, the sheer animal presence of it, 1,200 pounds of it, the hot breath and the rolling eye. The particular education of being hit by something that large, that panicked, that absolutely indifferent to your existence. Chicago hit you the same way. It did not care. It never cares. The city that can produce Marshall Fields and open sewers on the same block. The city that processes 80,000 animals a day and calls it commerce. The city that hanged 4 labour organisers and called it justice. This city was never going to make room for you. You were never going to arrive here and be welcomed. You were going to arrive and either find a way to hold your ground or not. You held it. That's the whole story. When you strip it down to its frame, you arrived, the city pushed, you held, and tomorrow you'll do it again. Thomas folds his newspaper. He blows out the candle. Darkness fills the room. The sounds of the city come through the small window, through the brick and plaster, the same sounds you've been sleeping to for a year. The distant rumble of the yards, the occasional sound from the street below, the breathing of people sleeping around you. Your eyes are already heavy. Your body has made its case. Enough. Sleep now. The morning comes when the morning comes, and the bells will ring and the pump will squeak and the mud will be exactly what the mud always is, and none of it requires your attention for the next few hours. The next few hours belong to you. The darkness is warm or warm enough. The blanket is wool and scratchy and smells like you, which is to say it smells like the city has decided you smell, and you have learned not to hold that against it. Your hands curled on the mattress are already beginning to unknot. The slow unfurling of closed fists, the fingers going loose, the particular relief of not gripping anything. Let it all go quiet now. The yards, still working in the dark somewhere south of you, their sounds attenuating with distance. The saloon on 47th Street, its last customers finding their way home, the specific comedy and sadness of that walk navigated by thousands of men every night across this city, finding their ways to their doors by memory and momentum. Mrs. Brzozowska, home and asleep, her coffee cart standing in its shed, the fire banked for morning, the cups stacked and clean. Tomorrow at 4:30 she'll be up again, moving through the pre-dawn dark with the kind of purpose that the city generates in people who have found their particular position in it. Piotr, in his building 2 streets over, probably asleep already. Piotr always sleeps early, as if gathering resources for the next assault. Andrei, calculating what he needs, what he has, what the distance is between the two. Grabowski, in his house, wherever Grabowski's house is, whatever the life of Grabowski outside the yards contains. The children you've heard him mention, the wife, the garden he tends in the summer in the thin strip of yard behind the house. Grabowski tonight is just a man who is also tired, who is also doing the math of what the city costs and what it gives back. The Nowakowski family, the second floor, Tadeusz Long recovered, his lungs young enough to repair what the winter did to them. This flexibility of the young body, this resilience, you have it too, you just can't see it from inside it. The way you can't see the blood returning to your feet when you warm them over the stove, only feel the evidence afterward. The city has 500,000 people in it tonight. 500,000 people folded into their beds and their chairs and their corners, replenishing, preparing, gathering whatever each of them will bring to tomorrow's version of the negotiation. 500,000 people who came from somewhere else mostly. 500,000 people who made the same calculation you made. The city of impossible smell, impossible scale, impossible demand, and also possibility. The same possibility that took 1,200 buildings and turned them into 1,500. The same possibility that looked at a flat, swampy piece of Midwestern lakefront and decided, here, a city. That possibility is still here. It has not been used up. It does not reduce. It is simply different for everyone who reaches for it. And it is never exactly what you thought it would be when you were imagining it from far away. And it is also not nothing. It is not nothing. Your breathing slows. The scratchy wool blanket, the straw mattress, Tomasz's steady breathing 2 feet away, the building's night sounds coming through the floorboards and the walls, the building settling, the building exhaling, the building doing whatever buildings do in the small hours when no one is watching. Your hands are loose now, fully open, palms up, on the mattress. Your back has released. The cold at the edges of the blanket, the place where the warmth runs out around your feet and shoulders, is manageable. The newspaper in the boot tips of the new boots is keeping. The coat is on the nail by the door, and in the morning you'll put it back on and it will smell like this and like the yards and like everything the year has deposited in its fibres, and you'll wear it into the cold morning and none of that will be remarkable. Let the morning wait. Let the 5 o'clock bells wait. Let Chute 3 and Grabowski and Andre's bellows breathing and the mud on the unpaved streets, and the 30-minute noon bell and the afternoon descent and the evening walk, let all of it wait. Right now, there's just this. The warm and the dark and the quiet. The body at rest, which is its own kind of information. All this, and still here. All this, and the breathing continues. All this, and the hands open. Sleep is coming. You can feel it at the edges. But let me tell you one more thing. One more Chicago thing before you go. In 1893, 7 years from where you're lying in this cold attic room, Chicago will host the World's Columbian Exposition. The White City, they'll call it. 250 gleaming buildings in neoclassical white on the lakefront, lit by electric lights, attended by 27 million visitors from around the world, a 6-month cathedral to American possibility. The fair will be built 4 miles south of where you're sleeping. The men who build it, the labourers, the construction workers, the men driving piles and laying foundations and raising those white facades, will look exactly like you. They'll live where you live. They'll come from where you came from. Some of them will be you if you stay. The fair will sit between 2 realities, the White City to the east, gleaming and visionary, and the Black City to the west, the stockyards, the smoke, the packed tenements, the mud streets. Both of them Chicago, both of them true. The world will come and see the White City and write about the future of American civilization. The men who built it will go back to their Halsted Street rooms when the fair closes and the contractors move on to the next project and Chicago resettles into its ordinary ambition. That's the cycle. That's always the cycle. You are in it right now. 140 years from where you're lying, people will live on this block, not in this building. The building will be gone, replaced and replaced again. Chicago eating its own history and rebuilding on the foundations, always rebuilding. But on this block, they'll walk to their jobs in weather that your pump-cold basin morning cannot prepare them for, because of what you and 500,000 others built here in the 1880s and 90s and after. They'll eat food that was processed by an industry you are literally inside the process of right now. They'll live in a city that is unrecognizable in its skyline and its scale, but recognizable in its nature. Big, loud, ambitious, cold, beautiful in ways that require you to look at an angle, not head on. They'll still smell the lake. Some things don't change. The human need for rest does not change. The body's right to its own silence at the end of a long day, that does not change. The small particular grace of warm enough, and fed enough, and here, still breathing, that does not change. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way the Chicago River takes everything eventually, steadily, without particular drama, doing the work it was made to do. Let the yards go distant. Let Grabowski's neck redness fade. Let the mud on your boots dry overnight in the cold by the door. Let the $47 in the tobacco tin keep being $47 until morning. Let the city run its night without you for a few hours. You've earned this, every hour of it. The hands are loose, the back is down, the breathing is slow and even, and the wool blanket is warm enough at the centre of the bed where two bodies have been resting all year, through November's cold and February's frozen pump, and April's elections and May's bomb, and June's slow grief, and the whole long summer south of 31st Street. The city breathes outside. You breathe inside. These two breaths, in and out, the enormous and the intimate, the 500,000 and the one. The bells, when they ring, are a long way off, and when they ring you'll get up. But that's then. Right now is just the dark and the warm and the slow dissolve of everything that was today into the general quiet where all the days eventually go. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. Let the straw mattress hold you. Let the city do what the city does. You're warm enough. You're here. You made it through another one. That's enough. That's enough. Good night.